Hi, I'm Sam Solomon, and this is Signal Tower, the show where we talk to entrepreneurs about startup design and education. Today, I am joined by Adam Wexler. Adam Wexler is the founder and chief strategy officer at Insightpool, the leader in social engagement and automation. He also started GoRankem, which is the Wikipedia for music discovery. Welcome to the show.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Insightpool?
So a little about myself. As far as myself goes related to business, I'm an entrepreneur. I probably born an entrepreneur. I've been starting companies since I was, sophomore, junior in high school, or not high school, college. Although there are kids that are starting them up in high school these days. Insightpool was basically about the fourth company that I started. Insightpool was spawned from my prior startup, as you mentioned, GoRankem, where, excuse me, we had been pursuing the B2C path for a good while, and for better or for worse, it had kind of dug me into a bit of a hole financially. Because we weren't sitting back on millions of dollars in funding like some of the folks out in the valley were, but what it allowed me to do was see what was out there and see what other opportunities there were, and especially with Insightpool, it's a B2B play, and we're in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Atlanta, if you can create a company that solves some problems for the Fortune 500 crowd, you can do all right for yourself.
Yeah. Well, so what are some of the problems that Insightpool is solving?
So, the way we look at it is so many brands, as far as social media goes, are treating it very reactively. They're capturing all the conversation that exists about their brand, which is great and all, and I totally think they should. Especially the service industry, getting all those complaints. You got airlines and. I have issues with my cable company, as you may know. But when it really comes to getting people to take specific actions, the desired actions, you've got to take a much more proactive approach.
Right.
You can't wait for people to come to you. You've got to go to them. You got to go find them, and also cultivate that interest or that desire in that particular subject matter. So that's kind of what we're helping brands do.
Great. And so I guess kind of what's your day like at Insightpool?
So my day, it depends on when the day, when you would consider the day starting. I'm pretty much a night owl.
Yeah.
So I often find myself, doing work into the early morning hours, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So if that's when it starts, sometimes I'll make sure I get myself 7-8 hours of sleep. I'm a big proponent of getting a certain dosage of sleep so that you can be productive throughout the course of the day.
Right.
But when I wake up, I roll out of bed, or even in bed, I'm checking my email, getting on Twitter to see what certain people are up to, see what they're saying, and then I roll out of bed and hop on my computer to start addressing emails, as well as start sending out emails. And then I actually, a decent bit of the time, end up working out of my own house the majority of the mornings. And I, because the way I look at it, I don't think it's necessarily the way that a proper usage of my time from an efficiency standpoint and effectiveness. If I jump into the shower, spend an hour getting ready, to just come into the office, where
right.
That 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. block is very critical, in my opinion, to be accessing certain people. So typically, as I like to tell people, I do my emails from East Coast to West Coast. So I'm trying to get in their inbox, first thing in the morning. So I figure out who I need to be, communicating with, and I basically just do the emails a good bit of the morning. And then, when I feel like it, when I feel like I've, got a number of things going, that's when I'll actually hop into the shower or whatever. Head into work, start scheduling meetings. Probably not personally. I don't even schedule meetings before 11. I don't even like to do breakfast. That's my time to obviously get caught up and get ahead. But start scheduling meetings at 11. Try to do a lunch meeting most days. The afternoon is where I'm catching up with the team and putting out fires as they kind of come through. I will say that one thing I'm trying to personally get better at is I end up finding myself the only time blocks where I can actually do much to move things forward, as opposed to just putting out these fires, is actually late at night where it's very quiet and I'm not getting disrupted by a lot of emails. So at some point, I'm gonna have to transition that productiveness into the normal business day hours. But for the time being, I can sustain it.
Right. Yeah, I understand. I think my most productive hours are like really early in the morning too, or late at night. I think it is because like there's no one up and there's really no distractions. So that's like for me the best time to write or design or do other things. So I guess what led you to entrepreneurship? I know you started your first business in college. I guess kind of what is your path on the way to becoming an entrepreneurship like?
Where should I start? When I was in a leadership program at the University of Georgia, and one of my favorite quotes that I read out of a book in one of my leadership courses was, "The best students don't always believe their professors," or something along those lines. I think it was in the book Good to Great. And I told that mistakenly to one of my professors right after reading that, and he wasn't one of the type of professors that really kind of took to it very well. So he kind of had it out for me the rest of the semester, but that's besides the point. But either way, what I was trying to say is that in terms of entrepreneurship, I always question things. I'm constantly looking around to kind of spot opportunities and
right.
See problems that could need to be solved. And I'm here to I'm a producer more than I am a consumer, and I want to kind of I want to move society forward in my own little way.
Right.
My dad was an entrepreneur. I think my grandfather was an entrepreneur, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So it's definitely in my blood. But I also didn't think I'd do a great job working for other people. So I needed to kind of, put something together myself.
Right. All right. Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about bootstrapping. You created GoRankem, which actually raised money on Kickstarter. Would you mind kind of talking a little bit about GoRankem and using Kickstarter?
Yeah. So that's in fact the only money we raised. So GoRankem. I'll address what you said at first. I started the premise for GoRankem back in the fall of 2007. Had an offer to raise some money from one of my former professors, who was a former Fortune 500 CEO, but yet he wanted to come in and create a board of directors, of which he would be chairman of the board before there was even a website, before there was anything. So it struck me as a little strange that I was just giving up that much control right off the bat.
Right.
So I actually declined. Little did I know that the economy was about to tank,
right.
And that there wouldn't be necessarily 100 other offers piled up. But for better or for worse, when the economy did go down, we put our heads down, and I built a team, and we we had to get pretty creative, for a good while during GoRankem, we were all making money through other ventures or just other initiatives. But as far as Kickstarter goes, I was actually helping manage a band right out of school, and Kickstarter was really in its infancy. And I had initially it had come on my radar through reading up on some music stuff, and in particular, I hopped on the platform and I started thinking of all the different ideas that we could utilize the platform for the band. And then it hit me. I'm like, well, just like they've got their own group of supporters, so does GoRankem. And the band was moving too slow, and I was just getting a little impatient. So I was like, why don't we test this out with GoRankem? Let's see what we can do here. And Kickstarter must have been less than 6 months old, I believe. At the time.
That was a while ago.
It was nothing like it is right now. But essentially what we did was we had no clue what to expect. We didn't kind of know what was going to pan out. So we put $1,000 as the goal, try to raise that in 30 days. Before you knew it, we had already raised $1,000 in 6 days. And then became a little more difficult because people, why should I donate if you've already hit your goal? So unfortunately, we had, put it a little too low. But we ended up raising close to $2,500. But considering hosting was our one and only primary business expense,
right?
Considering we weren't paying ourselves from GoRankem in those days, it went a long way to cover a large majority of our costs for a good while. So it was very helpful. I will say that, at the time, Kickstarter did not have a search functionality or anything close to that. So 100% of what we raised came through our own networks.
Right.
So essentially, the way I looked at it was just a glorified way of asking, friends and family for money. And what else was I going to say? I come to find out after the fact that we were supposedly the original web startup to successfully raise money on Kickstarter.
It's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, little did I know at the time it would be. We basically, of course, over time, then Diaspora came out, raised 6 figures. Now they've got people that are raising millions of dollars, and I literally think Kickstarter was the primary catalyst behind the whole Jobs Act and this whole crowdfunding movement. I think Kickstarter really just kind of put a spotlight on the industry, which is awesome. So it's cool to say we had a small part in that, and I actually may be involved in a movie that they're making about the whole Kickstarter journey. So
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a lot to think about, when bootstrapping a business. There's design, development, marketing, finding customers. I guess where do you start?
When bootstrapping a company, take it one day at a time. Whatever's top of mind, whatever needs to get done. I'm trying to think of a good answer to that question. You just got to cover your costs. Unfortunately, in the early days, you shouldn't have too many costs.
Right.
It's not necessary to get an office necessarily. Obviously, you can work out of home when you're just getting things off the ground. In our case with GoRankem, we had hosting. That was our cost. Especially when I was able to find some guys that were willing to just buy into the vision, buy into the dream, and then over time worked out equity arrangements, and that was enough. So we really didn't have expenses. Now, I will say though that maybe our efficiency suffered as a result because we were stingy when it came to certain things, or mainly I was stingy. So for example, stuff like product management or task management software or a CRM system, stuff like that we didn't have in the GoRankem days. Not that, that stuff's way more important in a B2B world or a B2B sense, but we could have used that, but we had to save costs at all measures.
Right. I kind of feel like the way, at least to me, like in the past, entrepreneurship has been taught. Like for first-time entrepreneurs, the thing is, we do have to go build this, and then we have to go find an audience afterwards. I feel like that that's a pretty big mistake that a lot of first-time entrepreneurs make. So I feel like bootstrapping kind of forces you to and you don't really have to worry so much about how to I guess raising money, but it allows you to kind of more focus on this is what we can do because you're working with limited funds.
Oh yeah, well going out and trying to raise money is not necessarily, doesn't do anything to move the company forward,
right?
Or move the vision or the product forward. So it's definitely is important for a number of companies to potentially go down that path. But the more that you have to focus on that, the less you're able to really focus on what matters the most. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to be an expert at everything. When do you need to bring in a contractor? What should you do yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm a big believer, big proponent of playing to your strengths and also acknowledging and really just acknowledging your weaknesses. So to that effect, one by one, I would find people that really could fill in, gaps around me. So my first hire was my lead developer. Next, we brought on somebody who was more of a front-end kind of guy, but also on the dev side. I could handle just about all of the different business responsibilities myself, in the early days. So I didn't need to fill in a gap there. And then finally, our fourth was he was a UI UX kind of guy.
Right.
And then he also did some little business stuff. He dabbled in that, when I needed an extra hand. But between the four of us, we had, a large majority of the bases covered. But every startup's different, so I don't think you can necessarily always model it after what we did. But it worked out pretty well. And then I was fortunate that I guess it says something about the culture that we had established and just the transparency and trust in the team that we all made the move over to Insightpool when that was starting to emerge. So it was the same team stuck together despite not really making any money off of GoRankem. And yet we were able to, have fun with it and enjoy the process. And it was a great learning opportunity. I look back at GoRankem as it's essentially my grad school. And it was a much more, it was a much more educational grad school than a lot of people end up getting. So,
what do you think? Do you think starting your business was more educational than your time in college?
Oh, absolutely. There's not a question. I went to the school of hard knocks. So,
let's talk a little bit about finding talent. John Birdsong talked about how difficult it was to find talent. If you're bootstrapping or if you don't, have a lot of funds, how do you find designers? How do you find developers?
So recruiting is definitely something that I tend to pride myself on, and I think most entrepreneurs, need to really be good recruiters.
Right.
So in terms of finding people, the universities are your best source. I'm not a big believer in posting stuff on job boards. That's not, in my opinion, how you go about finding the right people. But some of the best people, as well as some of the best opportunities, never get posted anywhere. And in my case, one of the ways that I was really able to find some great people was by running around Athens, Georgia, on campus and talking to all the different professors. I think it's definitely a hidden weapon that not nearly enough people do, because whether or not they're supposed to, the professors surely have some people in mind that are either their favorites or they think very highly of. Right. The funny story with my lead developer was I actually met him by way of a professor who pulled out a newspaper and said, "You should talk to this guy," and this guy was the student employee of the year, computer science major. So then I went to the university website, typed in his name, found his email address, and proceeded to email him. And he was a junior at the time, and he had not. This is a computer science kid,
right?
And he didn't even have a resume. So he needed me, and I needed him. And we're complete opposites, but it worked out pretty nicely, and we've stuck together ever since.
That's great. That's a great tip for people that are in college that are starting businesses. When should a founder decide to bootstrap his company instead of raising capital?
Well, definitely in the early days, you need to flesh out your idea. You should not. The first move should not be to go out and raise money. I don't care what the business is.
Right.
But rather than creating a business plan, which is actually what a lot of people encouraged me to do back in 2007, things are moving to just these one-page summaries. And that's good enough, just succinctly have your thoughts laid out. The business is going to, evolve very quickly over time. But in terms of going out and, bootstrapping, bootstrap as long as you can. But there's going to come a time for a lot of businesses where they need to go out and raise money to really accelerate the growth or build the team, build a product, whatever it may be. So bootstrapping is not for everybody. But I think the biggest thing that comes from bootstrapping is you learn how to creatively build your company from the ground up and be very mindful of kind of where every penny is going. So I think that there's a lot of good lessons that can be learned. I think every entrepreneur should experience a period of bootstrapping before they really just have $1 million and don't know what to do with it.
Right. Right. I guess maybe a better question is, why should someone go out and raise capital? What are some, signs that a company should go raise capital instead of just continue bootstrapping?
Well, I mean, I'll give you the example of Insightpool and kind of our progression. So, we Insightpool came about basically in July of 2011, and we basically hit the ground running when the kind of problem had been conveyed. We walked into an agency one day and they said, well, why don't you consider what you guys have been doing with GoRankem? Why don't you rank the fans in the social networks? Because everybody obsesses over their number. Nobody knows who all makes it up. I was like, I love it. Let me get to work here. So my interpretation, the way I spun it, and our original premise was I'm going to identify your influencers and turn them into your greatest advocates. And what's funny is we've kind of stayed down a similar path, but it took us a while to kind of make our way back there. But in the early days, because we were fresh off of a B2C startup that really kind of put me in a hole financially, we had to focus on short-term revenue, for better or for worse. So we were never able to build out. In the early days, it was unfortunate because I didn't have it. I was not able to use my resources properly. I had 3 technical resources that were, doing actual service-oriented work. So we found 2 ways to make money in the early days, but at a certain point, especially the one model of helping market research firms recruit people through social media channels. It's a good business. It has a lot of potential, but it was kind of a vicious cycle, and the margins weren't that great. And we wanted to build a technology company. We didn't want to be a service shop. So I had about probably 5 or 6 different offers, very comparable offers for people that would get involved to a certain degree, but more so put in, let's say, around $50K. I had about 5 or 6 offers that kind of came my way. Nothing really felt great until it was that I hooked up with my current partner last summer, and he was fresh off of a pretty significant exit, but still a young guy. He was 29 at the time and was looking for his next move, and we were talking casually as friends, and he was saying he wanted to get involved with a team, and I knew he always kind of admired my ability to go out and hustle. He would tell me stuff along those lines, but he didn't really know what the other guys were made of. But it just so happened around that time they ended up proceeding to win a hackathon competition. So he became very intrigued right after that with the 4 of us, and before you knew it, he became the 5th. And not only did he come on board, but he as a way to give us additional flexibility to actually build out the original vision, he put in a mini investment up front, then followed it up with another mini investment in the fall, just to make sure that we were able to really basically get by on nothing. He wanted to see how dedicated we were and just not give us any too much luxuries. But more than anything, getting him involved, the reason I did the deal and brought him on board was, I knew where I was strong and where I was, more importantly, not so strong, such as when it comes to operational stuff. I'm more of the creative, right-brained entrepreneur.
Right.
And I'm not one to be bound by formulas and spreadsheets and QuickBooks all day long. So I needed somebody that knew the business of being in business, but also there was plenty of overlap between the 2 of us. But it was great that I was able to for the first time basically bring on somebody where I could learn from somebody else as well. I was always having to teach myself, which is good to a certain extent, but you definitely want others that you can learn from, especially in the business capacity. So, but the last thing I will say is so we did those mini investments last fall. Earlier this year, we did a round of $250K, and that really allowed us to build out our team a little bit more. But more importantly, give us some extra breathing room to go out and close some deals. And before you knew it, we were starting to close some deals, and now we're going to be at an interesting point probably at the end of the year, where between our revenue and the original 250, we're going to be in great position and who knows, we'll be approaching profitability before you know it as well.
Wow.
But the biggest thing is, at a certain point, we're going to have to ask ourselves, do we want to step it up and go out and raise some venture capital funding? Because to a certain degree, it's going to become a land grab in our space.
Right.
And we've got first mover advantage right now. So do we just want to kind of grow it slow and steady, or do we want to actually, pump on the gas a little bit? And more than likely, I think, that might be the route to take. But it could be that we end up, making enough money through revenue that's all the money that we need, and that we don't need to necessarily have, get that VCs involved. So, time will tell, but it just really depends on kind of the situation, and everybody's is different.
Great. That's great. You kind of talked a little bit about transferring from, B2C to B2B. Why'd you decide to make that transition?
So I think it was very natural. As much as I really enjoyed the B2C world, but I will say that it was very difficult to run a B2C company in the state of Georgia at the time. We did not have nearly the luxuries that my counterparts did out in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, which is, I think, if you're going to do a B2C play, get out to San Fran if you can. And I couldn't, unfortunately. I wish it was a little different, but unfortunately, I think that it, and hopefully, Atlanta's becoming a little more doable from a B2C perspective.
Right.
But there's not enough investors that want to take chances on, the next Instagram or whatever. And it's not what they know either, so they're not going to invest in it because of that as well. But when it came to B2B, it was just a natural move because, I was familiar enough with, the state of Georgia and Atlanta, and I knew kind of what the strengths were, not only of me on a personal level, but also from a geography standpoint. And we're home to so many Fortune 500 companies that, if you can find a problem that many of them are sharing, and then go, try to create a solution that will help solve those problems, you can make a nice little business for yourself.
Right.
And we're on our way to doing just that.
Right. Great. Well, I guess how does a business to business company go out and find customers? You can't really just go up and kind of talk to people on the street like a consumer company would.
Yeah. You got to hustle. You got to go out and use the hell out of LinkedIn, Twitter. Talk to people. You got to figure out who you're trying to sell to, who needs your solution, and specifically who has the budget authority to actually pull the trigger. And we were extremely fortunate that we basically last June took a step back from where we had been, which was the kind of service-oriented business. I mean, there was a technology, but it was merely like our prototype that we had been kind of using to conduct the business. But with the mini investment, we were able to take a step back and really focus on the bigger vision at hand. And then when the product was kind of, when we kind of were ready to unveil it and we thought it was good enough, I'd say that was towards the end of the year, end of 2012, that is. And I don't think everybody's necessarily going to get this lucky, because there is a little bit of luck involved, especially from a timing perspective of when things tend to happen. But our first customer was in fact Holiday Inn, or at least of the new version of the company, you could say. And the way that we were able to get that business was I was invited to speak at an event towards the end of last year. And it just so happened that the way I presented Insightpool and the problem that we solved was, take digital advertising. It's great from an awareness standpoint, but it's not great for driving anything else.
Right.
And there were some folks from IHG, which is the parent company to Holiday Inn, in the room, and they were just nodding their heads as they told me after my presentation. And this was in December. Next thing you knew, it was the end of the year. They had the end of the year budget. Well, they cut their Facebook spend and put the rest of that towards Insightpool. And that was a cool day when we walked back into the office, and
I'll say
we were able to tell people that not only it's not just we got our first customer and you actually might recognize the name, They're called Holiday Inn. So that was a pretty cool little event that took place, and then we've been off to the races ever since.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. Do you speak at a lot of events?
I mean, especially I've spoken to thousands of students and event attendees in the past. When I was in Athens, especially, I would always go into a number of classes in every semester, and I thoroughly enjoy those. But as far as Insightpool goes, we need to speak at as many events as we can because we're basically pioneering a space. So there's a lot of thought leadership and educating involved, and for that reason, I have to go out there and kind of evangelize as best I can.
Right. Well, I'm kind of curious, like if someone is starting a company right now, and I guess they're kind of in the same position or want to be in the same position. How do you just email? Do you just email somebody and say, "Hey, I'd like to speak"? How do you get to that point?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think back from personal experience. You gotta. I've been networking in the community for over 5 years now. So there's plenty of people in the Atlanta area that know me and kind of hopefully respect the work that I've done to date. When they knew that what we were up to, and they have an event that they're trying to put an agenda together for, sometimes I would get those calls. Sometimes I'd find out about the event and then contact these people and let them know that I'd be happy to participate. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to just knowing the right people. For that reason, we've been fairly fortunate. Hey, we're still looking to speak at specifically some industry events. That's our bread and butter that we need to get up on stage, because when we can convey to people what it is that we do, as well as even demo the product, we've got a pretty high percentage in terms of people piquing their interest, and people get it. They just aren't currently thinking about it because it's more of a want than it is a need right now. So for that reason, it's a blessing and a curse, kind of where we are at the same time.
All right, that's great information. I guess the way I usually end these interviews is we kind of talk about a few kind of more, I guess, kind of personal questions. Outside of kind of what you're doing, what do you find interesting?
What do I find interesting? I'm a big sports guy.
Yeah. Falcons.
All Atlanta sports, all UGA. I will say that GoRankem, the funny story with that one is it was actually a fusion of my two biggest interests, sports and music. I essentially took the concept of the coaches poll that they come out with every week, where every coach ranks their favorite teams, and it's essentially a crowdsourced poll. And I said, well, just like the point totals that they hand out, that they distribute accordingly, we could essentially do the same thing for each artist and their catalogs. Get the people that know the subject matter the best, be it their own fans.
Right.
So essentially, I just took that whole model and just applied it in the music industry. And I still wholeheartly believe in the premise and the viability of GoRankem. It was just unfortunate that I picked the wrong industry from a career and monetary standpoint. But maybe one day, I'll rejuvenate that company. To answer your question, what are some other things I'm interested in? Obviously, music and sports are probably my two biggest passions, and that keeps me busy a good bit. But then, in terms of just what do I read? It's all entrepreneurship, technology, social media, and then a little ESPN as well. So,
do you have a book that you recommend, or a few books?
So one of the original entrepreneurial related books that I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad back in the day. And my favorite quote my favorite quote in business probably came out of that one, which is under promise and over deliver. But that's especially true in any job. But as far as other books go, I mentioned Good to Great earlier. That was another book that I highly enjoyed when I was in school. These days, it's unfortunate that I really don't have enough time to really digest long-winded books. I have to hop on Twitter, and articles are even too long for me at times. So tweets are a little more digestible. I'm about to go to Spain here later this week, and hopefully I'll be able to knock out a book, when that time comes. You definitely just consume as much as you can is what I would say.
And what about, do you have a mentor, or is there someone that you look up to?
A lot of people I look up to, and I keep up with what they have to say, and kind of definitely helps guide some of my thinking. In the Atlanta area, I think David Cummings, is a great guy to really kind of keep up with, and it's easy to keep up with kind of what he's doing because he puts out a blog every night. And he puts it out at just the right time for me because I end up, on Twitter, just looking for stuff, late at night, and he posts them at like 9:30 or 10 every night. But then on a broader level, guys like Fred Wilson, who's like, the most prominent probably venture capitalist at this point. I've always liked what he's had to say, as well as some other VCs, notably you got Brad Feld out in Boulder, Colorado, as well as Mark Suster, guys that are just extremely transparent. Some of them have been on the entrepreneur side, and now they've shifted over to the VC side, so they know exactly kind of what both sides look like.
Right.
But then as far as entrepreneurs go, there's plenty of them out there that I really kind of, look up to and admire, and Twitter makes it fairly easy to kind of keep up with them from a distance. But yeah.
Yeah, Twitter's great. I mean, I found that, the majority of the people that I follow are, either entrepreneurs or investors or designers or people in the space that I'm interested in. I think if I would have known that earlier, when I first joined Twitter, I was like, I don't understand what this is about, but I think that's really kind of like one of the key value things. You just get to follow people that you're interested in and that are doing interesting things.
Exactly, and it's funny you say that because that is the premise for our business, in fact, is this whole notion of interest graph analysis.
Right.
Where, while 95% of the companies that are built on top of Twitter are focused on analyzing the tweet stream, we actually think there's greater value to be had by analyzing who everybody follows. So we're one of the few companies that has really kind of honed in on that aspect of the platform. But it's interesting because it differs from Facebook, which is more of like the social graph.
Right.
You've got Twitter, which kind of shows you. I can quickly figure out what your interests are, maybe where you went to school, what your hobbies are, just by analyzing your last 20 followers or the people that you followed the last 20, as opposed to your last 20 tweets, where it'd be pretty difficult for me to pick up on. There's only so much information that I would have, and you'd have to obviously dissect it a little bit more.
Right. All right, I guess kind of, my last, main question. If you've got, a piece of advice, if you could give a piece of advice to a young entrepreneur starting out, what would you tell them?
100% of nothing is nothing. So don't get started and think about equity in the initial days. You got to go out and actually build a business. So personally, I don't even know. A lot of people have differing opinions about when that equity conversation should come up. But you just got to hit the ground running, and you just got to. It'll come when it comes. But too many people get too greedy in the early days, and it's a shame. And a last little piece of advice that I had to give some guys the other night that came by is don't hold back your ideas. So many people want to hold them close to their chest, and if they only were able to vocalize what they're thinking, and they would get some great feedback. And as I always tell them, whatever's going through your head, you're probably 10 steps ahead of anybody else. So spelling out your idea to somebody's. They're too busy doing what they're doing to drop everything and do what you want to do. So the more that people feel comfortable to talk about their ideas, the better feedback they're going to get, and the more they're going to progress their companies forward.
So I guess, do you have any last kind of questions or comments? I always ask, is there something that I needed to ask you in this interview that I didn't?
No, I think it's interesting discussion. I'm always, happy to talk about this kind of stuff. And, at the end of the day, just like I said earlier, don't believe in necessarily everything that I say, right? Hey, I'm still learning. I think I'll always be learning. But fortunately, I'm on my second web-based business, and I've learned a lot. And I think we've got something good going. And I don't think it'll be long before a lot of people start to recognize the name Insightpool, which I think they're already starting to do.
Definitely. All right, Adam. Well, where can people follow you?
First off, I'm always happy to talk to aspiring entrepreneurs. It's adam.wexler@insightpool.com is my email. I'm at the Word Painter on Twitter, and that's probably all you need to know in terms of where to find me.
All right, Adam Wexler, thank you for joining me today.
I appreciate you having me.